The views expressed on the Jerry Cahill CF podcast are that of Jerry Cahill and guests, and not necessarily those of the Boomer Esiason Foundation. Nothing on the Jerry Cahill CF podcast should be considered medical advice. Such advice can only be given by a physician who is experienced with cystic fibrosis. The Boomer Esiason Foundation, Jerry Cahill and guests cannot be held responsible for any damage which may result from using the information on this podcast without the permission of your medical doctor. You're listening to the Jerry Cahill CF podcast presented by the Boomer Esiason Foundation at jerrycahill.com.
Welcome to Jerry Cahill's Living, Breathing, Succeeding podcast series. This episode, Exercising for Life While in the Hospital, was made possible through an unrestricted educational grant from Gilead to the Boomer Esiason Foundation. In this episode, I will be discussing how to stay active in the hospital room, as it's important to keep up your routine and keep moving to keep your lungs clear. Well, my little friend over there, I put an IV in him, since I'm so experienced, they call me Dr. Cahill now. Hi, my name is Jerry Cahill. I'm 60 years old with cystic fibrosis and I'm post-double lung transplant just about 5 years now. Today I'm in the hospital at New York Presbyterian and I wanted to talk about exercise while you're in the hospital room. So I come from an active background, so when I go into the hospital, I like to keep up my routine of being active and exercising a lot, and I believe that that keeps me healthier. I started being physically active in the hospital when I was growing up with cystic fibrosis, and I would have to go into the hospital for 2 weeks at a clip. Being very confined in the hospital is very difficult. I mean, when you go into the hospital, as far as I'm concerned, life stops. So I started to try to do a little exercise here and there, and then I would get a pass to go down to an exercise room. But things have changed with that because of cross-infection. So pretty much now you're confined to your room. So from the disciplines that I've learned through sports growing up, that I've just taken that into the world of cystic fibrosis and being in the hospital, and it's worked for me. It becomes part of my therapy. So when I'm in the hospital room, I just like to stay as active as possible. It makes the day go quicker, and it makes me feel better. So I do some aerobic exercises in the room, I do a lot of stretching, and I do some lifting and push-ups to get stronger. Being in the hospital when I'm doing some exercises, I've never really been stopped. I mean, some of the doctors will come in and nurses and they'll wonder what I'm doing, and for the most part, they're pretty proactive and positive about it. It's not like they'll tell me not to do certain things, unless it's something, if I have an IV in my arm and I'm trying to do something that's gonna damage the IV or the PICC line, then it's a problem, but I'm pretty careful about things. I'm not gonna do something that's kind of going to damage the PICC line or whatnot, because I don't want to get stuck with needles again. So, there are times that I'm in the hospital that I am confined because I'm not feeling well and I have fevers and whatnot. In the hospital, I'm on IV antibiotics a lot. Right now, I have my IV in here. The great thing about the IV is that you get hooked up to the IV, then you come off the IV unless they have you on fluids. So right now, I have an IV in my arm, but I'm not hooked up, so I can move around and do a lot of things with it. The situation, then pretty much in bed, I can do leg raises and I can do side stretching, and I have a rope that I use that I can just tie it around my ankle a bit and just start stretching. I just feel that the more I can get the blood flowing and get the body moving, the better off I'll feel. I just don't feel well when I'm just lying around like a vegetable in bed, and I don't think it's good for anybody to be doing that in the hospital. You really need to get moving and move your body. If I'm in the hospital, some of the things that I'll do for a workout, I'll start out doing some stretching. I may start out, putting my leg on the bed and stretching out my hamstrings. I also like to hold my ankle and stretch out my quads. Just to get, an easy stretch, I'll hold a towel or a rope that I bring in over my head and do side stretches, or just bending over and trying to touch my toes to help loosen me up, especially if you're lying around a lot, you tighten up in the hospital. So that's kind of when I start out. I have like a regular routine where I'll do a lot of stretching, and from there I'll go into a little bit of upper body work. I'm a little obsessed and crazy. I like kettlebells, but I'll bring a light kettlebell into the hospital and I do some swings with it. But using the kettlebell, I can work a lot of my upper body and my total body and my core. So it's really good for some power lifting. I'll do push-ups also. I wear gloves when I do push-ups, and I do a variety of push-ups, and I do planks. So these are some of the things that I do there, and then I do a lot of little squats, standing and squats against the wall. So I build up my legs a lot. And that's kind of it, and it'll vary a little bit as I'm doing things. I listen to music, I like to put some music on. And and I also like to use bands. Bands are kind of the greatest thing in the world, especially for working your upper body and working your legs. So I put the bands around my ankles, or I'll put them, hold on to them, and I just do stretches with the bands. Each color is a different strength, so some of them are harder to pull than others. And sometimes I tie the band onto the bed, and I'll just do a lot of stretching with it tied to the bed. What motivates me to work out in the hospital is because I hate being sick, and I know if I take better care of myself and do exercise, my chances of coming back in the hospital will be less. And when I get out of the hospital, I don't want to have to start from ground zero and start up from the beginning. The exercise in the hospital will help clear out my lungs faster. Being in the hospital, nutrition is extremely important also. I can remember back when I first started going into the hospital, they would just load me up with soda and cookies, and because they just wanted me to get calories in. But I've learned in the long run that's the worst thing to do. So right now when I'm in the hospital, I bring a shaker bottle and I make protein shakes. So I'll drink milk with protein powder, and I try to eat fruit versus cookies. And I do hydrate a lot, especially if you're in the hospital getting antibiotics. That really is a big stress on your kidneys and liver. So I just keep hydrating. I drink lots of water. When you're working out in the hospital, you've got to do it smartly. If you don't work out at all, then starting your exercise routine in the hospital is probably not the smartest thing. But I believe that when you're in the hospital, you're going to be a little weaker to begin with. The IV antibiotics, they knock you out, but you've got to do something. So if you stay a little active, you'll feel better about yourself. And if you wake up and you're sore in the morning, I always remember when I'm training, if I wake up in the morning, it's kind of a good hurt because I feel better knowing that I worked my body hard.